Mike Johnson of Louisiana. Speaker Johnson, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Glad to be with you, and it's a great morning in Washington.
Well, it is an honor to have you here. We really appreciate it. I do want to start in the Middle East with that ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas now in effect. President-elect Donald Trump told me in that phone interview yesterday that this deal, quote, better hold. Mr. Speaker, are you confident that this ceasefire agreement will in fact hold?
We're very hopeful about that. I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu, I believe, on Thursday of this past week. They're cautiously optimistic. Hamas is a terrorist organization. They're not known to keep their word, but we need these hostages released, and we hope they're released into safety. We hope that there is peace in Israel. But I will say this, if Hamas breaks the ceasefire, they need to know the United States will stand with our ally Israel, and Israel will have to eradicate that threat. It's very important for the stability of the region.
By all accounts, the first round of hostages that is set to be released are not Americans. Are you confident that the American hostages will be released in the coming days, if not weeks?
We certainly pray that that is true. We've met constantly with the hostage families. They've been on Washington advocating for their family members. It's such a tragic situation and so unnecessary. But again, it highlights the necessity of Israel taking decisive action. You cannot allow Hamas, which of course is a proxy of Iran, to be situated as they were, to have another October 7. We just can't. The Israelis can't live under those conditions. And everyone around the world needs to know, as President Trump has made clear, that we stand with Israel, and there will be hell to pay for Hamas if they violate these terms.
What does hell to pay mean?
We'll have to find out. I'm not going to forecast that action, but I will tell you, President Trump is coming back to restore peace through strength, and that's what the American people voted for, and that's what our allies around the world are counting on.
Let me ask you about the big news overnight, TikTok going dark for millions of users ahead of this nationwide ban going into effect. Both President Biden and President-elect Trump are signaling that they want to delay the ban. By the way, they both at one time supported the ban, but you were a very strong supporter of this ban, Mr. Speaker. You said that, quote, Beijing is our #1 foreign threat. You have called TikTok a, quote, serious and direct threat. Are you concerned by not enforcing this law? The U.S. is sending a message of weakness to China?
No, I think we will enforce the law. And when President Trump issued the truth post and said, save TikTok, the way we read that is that he's going to try to force along a true divestiture, changing of hands, the ownership. It's not the platform that members of Congress are concerned about. It's the Chinese Communist Party and their manipulation of the algorithms. They have been flooding the minds of American children with terrible messages, glorifying violence and anti-Semitism and even suicide and eating disorders. I mean, crazy kind of stuff. And they're mining the data of American citizens. It's a very dangerous thing. The Chinese Communist Party is not our friend, and we have to make sure this changes hands. I'm really heartened to see that Google and Apple and Microsoft have taken the steps to comply with the law. There needs to be a divestiture from the Chinese Communist Party. And I think President Trump is the one that can make that deal happen. So we're excited about it.
As you say, he did post just this morning, save TikTok. When I spoke with him in that phone interview on Saturday, he said to me that he is likely going to impose a 90-day extension to give TikTok that extra time to divest from the Chinese-owned company ByteDance. But, Mr. Speaker, they have had months to sell their ownership. Why are they going to do it now if they haven't done it so far? Why should Americans have confidence?
That's the question. We don't have any confidence in ByteDance. They had 270 days to be exact. The law is very precise. And the only way to extend that is if there is an actual deal in the works. Now, Kevin O'Leary and I think maybe even Elon and others have talked about buying it. I think Kevin O'Leary has an offer on the table. I think President Trump is probably intrigued by all this, and he likes to make deals, as you know. So we're very hopeful that that can happen and that 270 million American people who enjoy the platform can enjoy it, but enjoy it safely and not have their data being mined by our nation's enemy.
Let me ask you about the big news that you made this week, Mr. Speaker. You replaced Congressman Mike Turner as the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman Turner has said publicly that you told him there were a range of reasons, including, quote, concerns from Mar-a-Lago. Did President Trump ask you to dismiss Mike Turner?
Of course not. No, the idea, the notion that this was directed by the incoming administration is just There's a range of decisions that are made when you're determining chairmanships. For my colleague Mike Turner, good friend, he's a great leader in Congress, did a good job under very difficult circumstances in the last Congress. But the whole intelligence community suffered a lack of trust over the last years because of abuses, not on the part of anyone in the House. The intelligence community is the oversight mechanism that we have over that. And it just seemed like a good time to have a change. So that's all it was.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have to tell you this. You have an historically razor-thin majority. You can only afford to lose 2 votes. Did you just risk alienating a critical, moderate vote that you are going to need to get the Trump agenda passed, Mr. Speaker?
No, as I said, Mike Turner and I are good friends, trusted friends and colleagues. He will still be one of the top leaders in the House. In fact, I reappointed him, asked him to serve again, and he graciously agreed. He is the face of the House with NATO.
But do you think you can count on his vote, Mr. Speaker?
Oh, sure. Look, Mike is a team player. He's going to help us enact the American First Agenda. No question about that. But he will be the leader of NATO's Parliamentary Assembly, America's leader. In fact, he's the chair of that whole organization. They'll be hosting it in his district in Dayton, Ohio. All the NATO leaders, our colleagues coming in for that. He's a strong voice in terms of national affairs and the intelligence, and he'll continue to be that.
All right, let's talk broadly about the Trump agenda. Obviously, at the top of the list, his plans for mass deportation. He told me in a previous phone call there is no price tag for his mass deportation plan. And yet, by some estimates, it will cost as much as $88 billion per year just to deport 1 million people. Are you, is Congress prepared to support and pay for President-elect Trump's mass deportation plan, no matter what the cost, no matter how expensive?
Kristen, I cannot think of a better dollar-for-dollar investment than to restore the security and the safety of the country. We've had a wide-open border for 4 years and millions upon millions of illegal persons. We have dangerous illegals in the country, criminals who have already committed crimes here, violent crimes against American citizens. The best thing we can do is return those people from where they came. And I think the American people understand that. I saw a New York Times poll, I think it was just 2 days ago, 87% of the American people agree that we should deport dangerous, illegal, criminal aliens. And that's what we're going to do.
And yet the cost is staggering. And you said just last summer, quote, our biggest national security challenge is our national debt. Does that mean that you are committed to making sure that his mass deportation plan is paid for with offsets?
Well, sure. Listen, the number one job of the federal government is protecting the citizenry. When you have a wide open border, you don't have safety, security, or even sovereignty for that matter. President Trump is going to follow through on his campaign promises and the promises that we all made on the campaign trail. It costs money to do that, but that is a small investment in terms of what it cost us, what this staggering cost, the lack of resources in our local communities that has been pulled to handle this sanctuary cities nonsense that these Democrat cities brought about, and all their policies, and then the crime wave that it's brought up upon the country, the untold humanitarian cost in terms of trafficking and fentanyl deaths, a leading cause of death for Americans age 18 to 49 for the last few years. We have to get on top of this. And so getting rid of that criminal element, that dangerous element, is something the American people want us to do.
Just bottom line, you are willing to spend trillions of dollars if that's what it costs to get this plan passed?
Look, it won't cost trillions of dollars. I think we don't yet know the dollar figure, but I will tell you that the American people are going to support that effort. And we're going to begin with the most dangerous elements. And you're going to see a dramatic change in the country because of it.
President-elect Trump has also said he was elected and reelected for 2 issues, the border and grocery prices. Can you guarantee that under President-elect Trump, under this Republican Congress, that grocery prices will in fact come down?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that, because we're going to return to fiscal sanity, as President Trump says, common sense. And that is, we're going to make sure we don't have the largest tax increase in U.S. history at the end of this year when the Trump tax cuts would expire. And then we're going to turn the economic engines back on. We know how to do this. We did it in the first Trump administration. If you remember, right before COVID, after Trump took office, we had the greatest economy in the history of the world. I mean, incomes were rising, labor participation rates were up, every demographic in the country was doing better. And then COVID hit and everything happened after that. But the way we did that is we reduced the tax burden on the American people, but even more importantly, the regulatory burden. That's going to be a major theme of the upcoming administration and this Congress, because if you release the red tape, you unleash the free market again, and that's good for everybody.
But is there, bottom line, one piece of legislation targeted at bringing down grocery prices for the American consumer?
It's a complex collection of legislation because we got to unwind and fix everything. I was on the campaign trail all last year, traveling around the country. I logged enough miles to circle the globe 5.5 times. We kept the House majority, we won the Senate majority for the Republican Party, and we won the White House. And we told the American people that we would do well by them. And what I said on the campaign trail was, to summarize, we could be the most consequential Congress of the modern era because we have to fix everything. I mean, everything's a mess. So it's not just one switch that you flip back on. It's a number of them, and we have to make it all work together, and we will.
All right, let's talk about disaster relief for California. I want to tell you something that California Governor Gavin Newsom wrote recently. He said, quote, "There must be no conditions, no strings attached to disaster aid." And yet we know that there's a big conversation happening right now on Capitol Hill about linking disaster aid for California to an increase in the debt limit, which has been a traditionally really thorny issue. Are you and can you commit that California disaster relief won't have strings attached?
No, I won't commit that because we have a serious problem in California. Listen, there are natural disasters. I'm from Louisiana. We're prone to that. We understand how these things work. But then there's also human error. And when the state and local officials make foolish policy decisions that make the disaster exponentially worse, we need to factor that in. And I think that's a common sense notion. Listen, in California, over the last couple of years, they cut $100 million from forestry management. They cut, I think, almost $18 million from LA's fire department, putting them into their other crazy priorities. And you had a 117 million gallon reservoir that was left empty for a year outside Pacific Palisades. Those were decisions they made based on whatever their ideas were, but it made it worse and everyone knew it would. And the risk was there.
So it could be linked to the debt limit, to an increase in the debt limit.
Potentially. That's one of the things we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you about the pardons Mr. Trump has promised for January 6th defendants. When I interviewed him last month, he would not rule out pardoning those, even those who pleaded guilty to violent crimes. Mr. Speaker, do you believe that someone who assaulted a law enforcement officer on January 6th deserves a pardon?
No, I think what the president said and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance has said is that peaceful protesters should be pardoned, but violent criminals should not. That's a simple determination. It's up to the president on that, but there's been a lot of talk about it, but we'll see what happens.
President-elect Trump, just to be clear, has said he's going to look at everyone. When I interviewed him, he said he's not ruling out anyone. So my question for you, would you oppose a pardon for someone who has pleaded guilty to assaulting a police officer?
Look, every case needs to be evaluated, as he said. But what President Trump is getting at is the lack of faith that people have right now in our system of justice. It was abused for the last few years, under the last 4 years under the Biden administration. The Department of Justice itself was weaponized. When the people lose their faith in our system of justice, that is what leads to all these other concerns. And President Trump's going to restore that. We're going to have new leadership.
Very quickly, we're almost out of time. What will you be listening for? What do you want to hear tomorrow in President-elect Trump's inaugural address?
Well, we're going to usher in a new golden age for America. He's excited. We're all excited. Everyone. You walk around the city, there's this sense of anticipation because we know that something big is happening here. I feel like the comparison to Reagan this morning on moving it inside, I think is apt because it was morning in America under Reagan. Now we're going to have a new golden age. You're going to hear that hopeful tone, I think, in President Trump's speech and a unifying speech. And I think that's really important for the country.
House Speaker Mike Johnson.